Hello there, Ben Bowers, the Spirit Specialist, and I am here today to talk to you about a brand new release from the English Distillery. And this is a very special limited edition release because it's a special year for the distillery itself. This is the English Distillery Chapter 18. Now, you might not be aware, and I'll mention this in the blurb, but when the English Distillery first started releasing their whiskies, they released them as chapters. So I think it was like chapter 1 to 4, technically wasn't even whiskey, but the chapters were going to be chapters in the history of the distillery as it developed and evolved over time. That kind of changed and it became what we've got here. If you can see on there, we've now got the original, the smoky, the sherry cask matured, which was last year's world's best single malt at the World Whisky Awards. But this year, 2025, is actually the 18th anniversary of the distillery. And kind of fortunately, the last chapter that the distillery did before they did the rebranding was chapter 17. So chapter 18 is a very handy way of being able to do a special edition bottling, harking back to these chapters, as well as referencing the fact that we are in the 18th year of the distillery's operation. So before I tell you what this tastes like, I'm going to give you some background information about it and also the makeup of what is in this bottle. Because this is, at time of recording, contains the oldest English whiskey in not just the English distillery, but the English whiskey category as a whole, and you'll find out why.
The English Distillery was originally named the St George's Distillery and is based in Roundham, Norfolk, about 30 minutes south-west of Norwich. The first whisky distillery sited in England for just over 100 years, the Lea Valley Distillery in London was the last to operate in the country until its closure in 1905. It was founded in 2006 by father and son James and Andrew Nelstrop, who were part of generations of arable farmers but were looking to diversify their operations due to concerns with the future of the industry they had spent years working in. Initially, Iain Henderson, previously the Master Distiller of Laphroiag and already enjoying semi-retirement, was brought on board to oversee operations, before being joined in 2018 and eventually replaced by David Fitt, who had previously been a master brewer with Greene King and mentored with Iain for 6 months until he fully took over the reins. James Nelstrop sadly passed away in September 2014, but Andrew continues to honour his father by driving the business forward with unbridled passion and enthusiasm. Early bottlings were released as chapters to denote the progressive story of the distillery as it grew, but in 2016 a rebranding took place to introduce a core range of an unpeated original and a heavily peated smoky edition, as well as various peated and unpeated bottlings that have spent time in a variety of cask types. In 2023, a sherry cask matured bottling joined that core range, and it was awarded World's Best Single Malt at the World Whisky Awards the following year. The last chapter to be released to the public was number 17, until early June 2025, where as part of celebrations for the 18th anniversary of operations, Chapter 18 was launched as a limited edition bottling featuring some of the oldest spirit produced at the distillery. The release is a marriage of differently aged whiskies from a variety of cask types, broken down as follows: 10-year-old refill virgin, 10-year-old refill American Standard Barrel, also known as ASB, ex-bourbon, 12-year-old ex-Pedro Jimenez Sherry, 15-year-old first fill ASB ex-bourbon, 18-year-old first fill ASB ex-bourbon, and a small amount of 15-year-old peated stock. Of course, as this is spirit produced and matured at the distillery, this still remains a single malt whisky, not, as some people might think hearing that marriage, a blended whisky. Intended as a limited edition release to be opened and enjoyed instead of just sitting on a shelf, 7,500 decanters in a tube featuring images detailing the history of the distillery have been made available worldwide at an alcoholic strength of 46% ABV.
So we've got in this bottle some of the oldest whiskey in the category, because the English Distillery was the first. Now, about a month ago, maybe slightly longer than that actually, I was fortunate enough to be invited down to the distillery on a trade day, where we were, there was about probably 15 of us down there for a few retailers up and down the country, and we were given a tour. We also had a chance to try this, plus a couple of others. And Andrew was telling us that there was actually supposed to be a distillery that was going to precede them, based somewhere in the lakes, Now, I've done a bit of research, and I couldn't really find I've not done a huge amount of research on it. If I do any more after I've shot this, I might be able to put the name of what the distillery was going to be called. It's not the Lakes Distillery. But in essence, what happened was this distillery somewhere in the Lake District was probably going to be before the English Distillery, or as it became to be known at the time, the St George's Distillery. They started like pre-selling casks, and Andrew was saying that there was a Scotch distillery doing the same, where basically they hadn't even like put a brick down to build the distillery, and they were pre-selling casks, and everything fell apart. So that was why initially the St George's / the English never did cask sales until they kind of had established themselves and realized they were at a point where they could, with the integrity and the backup and the security for those that were buying it. So the English was sort of fortunate to be the very first, but it's very interesting now looking at the map of the 61 English distilleries that we've got now, and even that number is growing almost by the day, that after 2006, it wasn't really until 2011 that the category as a whole really took off. So, you know, they are in a very, very fortunate position to be the first of the whole English whiskey category as we know it, which, you know, with the likes of Filey Bay, with the likes of White Peak, is going great guns. There's some absolutely amazing English distilleries out there. There's some not so amazing ones. There's a few gin distilleries that have just thrown a load of spirit into cask and think that they can just get away with, oh, it's got whiskey on the label and we'll sell loads of it. Let's see how long they last, particularly with the market as it is. But the English have really, to be honest, done a good job in turning things around, because a lot of the early stuff wasn't great. When Iain Henderson was on board, and I remember having a conversation with David Fitt several years ago, who obviously mentored under Iain, and David tells it like it is anyway. And David was kind of like, look, Iain had basically semi-retired. He was kind of just winding down. He was, you know, helping out, and he was committed, but it was almost like his heart wasn't really in it. And a lot of the very early releases from the English were okay, you know, they were fine, but they weren't brilliant. They weren't groundbreaking. There was no real kind of identity and everything like that. Once they did this rebrand and they went to the original and the smoky, and David kind of like took over from Iain and really kind of put his stamp on it, we do see a marked improvement in the spirit. So a lot of the earlier spirit runs were sort of not as good, but there were some diamonds within there. So what we've got with the chapter 18 is this is not just an 18-year-old. Now, I've had to write this down because what I normally do is I do this little, I do the review, film this bit first. Then when I'm doing the editing, that's when I will do that kind of black background blurb. So I got the details of what is in this makeup in this bottle from Mike, who is the UK sales director, Europe sales director, I think probably world sales director, who I have known for several years. I actually got his job from G&M when he left. So he sent me the makeup because when we were doing the tasting at the distillery, Andrew was telling us what the breakdown was. And I, like a complete numpty, just never wrote it down, or I got like halfway and then was like trying it at the same time and didn't actually manage to get the whole thing down. So he's given me, I've written this because I will put this on the voiceover. I have technically already told you this. This is more for my benefit. But in here, we do have a combination of ages that have been married together. Obviously, it's still single malt whiskey because it's still from the same distillery. But it's not just an 18-year-old. So in this, we've got the Refill Virgin, which is kind of like, comes across like an oxymoron, but essentially it was originally a virgin oak cask that they used to mature some of their spirit that has then had more spirit put in afterwards. So that's 10-year-old. We've got a 10-year-old ex-bourbon. We've got 12-year-old PX in there. So already I'm kind of like, no, I'm probably going to like this. 15-year-old first fill ex-bourbon, and then 18-year-old first fill ex-bourbon. So basically within this, now what he's not told me, I don't know, there's no official word on it, is what the proportions are of that. You know, it could literally be, it's got a teaspoon of 18-year-old. I doubt that, to be honest. But, you know, I don't know what the proportions are of this. But interestingly, we do have a small amount of 15-year-old peated spirit in this as well. So it'd be very interesting to see whether that comes through or not as we go through the tasting. Now this is also in their decanter bottle. So this is what their premium releases tend to be. So these are when they've done the Founders Reserves, the 16, 17-year-old that came out in the previous 2 years is like the oldest bottlings they've ever done. Probably safe to say that there'll be some kind of Founders 18-year-olds. I think that will carry on. There'll be an 18, there'll be a 19, there'll be a 20. They do say that those Founders are kind of like, you know, the best of the best and the one-offs, but to have an oldest English whiskey every year kind of makes sense. But it tends to go in this bottle rather than that one. So that's kind of like the core bottlings, the standard bottlings. Some of their like finishes and things like that do go in this. But this is a much more premium bottle. We've also got this fantastic, so this apparently is with a new designer on the tin. So we've got a lot of pictures around here. And if I don't know if I'll be able to get in focus, but that picture there, the guy in the middle, the attractive hirsute guy, that is Mike Fisher, and this is the point where the Sherry Cask Matured won the world's best single malt last year. But lots of pictures around it that are kind of detailing the history of the distillery itself. We've got a picture of Prince Charles signing cask number 1 there. Really nice packaging all around. But what's good about this is, normally, this is like £100 plus if it's in this bottle. This is like their premium wine. Excuse me. Retail price, we're looking at $74.99. And Andrew was telling us that this is to be opened and drunk. You know, they've got celebrations going on this year. There's potentially a couple of very special bottlings coming out that are more likely going to be kind of collector's items. So things like the Founders Reserve, you know, the 16-year-old, the 17-year-old, we were looking at like 250 quid. And once you start getting to those price points, more often than not, the people that are buying them aren't necessarily drinking them. It's more to kind of sit on a shelf or be part of a collection or potential investment and all this lot. As much as I'd love those bottles to be open and drunk. They've deliberately put it at a price point where more people are going to open these. Yes, there might be some people that are setting them aside. 7,500 bottles worldwide. From what I gather, there is no distribution in America, which surprises me because, you know what the English are like with the Americans. Maybe at the time of recording, relationships are a little bit strained, but, you know, this is worldwide, not including the US. So, you know, it's a limited edition, but it's not like there's only 100 bottles of this. But they put it at a price point deliberately because they want people to open and drink this. This is not a single cask bottling. This is not a kind of like, you know, they've not deliberately not gone like heavily peated or anything like that. This is a celebration of the distillery reaching 18 years old, and they want as many people to open and drink this bottle as possible, but they want the bottle to look good. They want it to kind of have this celebration feel, this premium feel, without really jacking the price up. So, it's a bloody heavy bottle as well. It really is. And you really feel like you're getting your money's worth by having like a really good solid decanter. The only downside with the decanter, and I've always had this issue, is because of this big, thick, wide rim that they put on there, it is a little bit of a awkward to pour. It kind of, you know, it dribbles a little bit down the side. In fact, it's literally just done it on my hand. Anyway, let me pop that down there. So, what about the liquid itself then? You've been rambling on forever. Get on with it. So, we are bottled at 40 crap percent. 46%. So the bottles are numbered as well. So this was 2870. This sample bottle that I got from Mike kindly was 726. He basically came in and he said, "Oh, I've got a leftover sample bottle for you if you want to try it and share it out with some customers." And it was like that. It's like, okay, thanks very much. So I'm going to see if I can potentially do something with that. Might have some changes going on within the shop that might see that come into use as well. So 46%, 75 quid, limited number of bottles, individually numbered as well, which is, believe it or not, harder to do than it sounds. Because you have to do labelling, and these are printed. These aren't handwritten either. No, they are not handwritten. So every label has to be printed individually. It's not just a case of printing it off and then having somebody write the individual numbers. You've got to bear in mind that it's not just running off a print of labels. You've got to get it programmed so that it's doing a different number. Trust me on this, having had conversations and been involved in it, it's harder to do individually numbered bottles than you would think. So, what about the liquid? Because you're still rabbiting on. All right. So, on the nose, really fruity. Now, I've found that the English has a very orchard fruit, almost from the new make spirit onwards. A lot of distilleries will have their own kind of house style that goes from new make spirit, and you only really it only sinks in until you do a tasting where you literally have new make spirit to start. Oh, excuse me, new make spirit to start with. I've just smacked that as well. That's going to come out really loud. New make spirit to start with, and then you go through some of the other. So I did one with Lindor's Abbey where we had last year before, we had new make spirit, and then we had their various releases. And having had that new make spirit, you could pick up that house style all the way through the other. Lockley's another one, Filey Bay's another one. And the English, that kind of core flavour profile, for me personally, is very much like orchard fruits. So there's apple, there's pear, but there's also a slightly softer sort of peach, sort of nectarine, not quite going into plums and damsons and things like that, but there's a lovely overriding fruitiness, and that really comes through on the nose. Little bit of kind of baking spice in there as well. You know, we know that there's nothing younger than 10, so we've got like a good bit of aging on here. Really nice kind of like, it's not quite tart tatin, there's not quite that kind of like caramelized note on it. It's more of a baked like apple and pear pie. There is a sort of a short crust element in there, maybe a little sprinkling of brown sugar over the top of it. But really fruity, really warm. There's a slight sweet note, which was starting to go to kind of candy floss, but I wouldn't say it's a sweet whiskey. That baking spice note as well is kind of stopping it becoming too sweet and kind of giving it a nice little, almost like just a little prickle just on the top. It's really, really nice. And that really carries through. Lots of like poached apple, poached pear. That spiciness again, it's kind of slightly drier than it is on the nose. There's a little bit of like chili flakes coming through, a little bit of like white pepper, not necessarily cracked black pepper, and that probably is that little peated element that's coming through there, just adding a little bit of spice. I wouldn't say this is smoky in any way. It's almost imperceptible to pick up any kind of obvious smoke, peat element, that sort of thing. And if you've watched previous videos, you know I'll talk about the fact that peat is, depending on where the peat is sourced from, will give you a different type of smokiness. You know, a lot of people associate peat with, oh, it's Laphroiag, Ardbeg, Lagavulin. No, peat. Smoke is different. You get different types of smoke. We've got bonfire, we've got barbecue, we've got coaster, we've got all different types of smoke. I wouldn't say that there is a smoky element in here. What I would say is that there is a spiciness to it. There is a slight element of like chili flakes, white pepper that I believe is coming from that element of peated whiskey that's in there. And it's just adding this subtle extra dimension. The finish is not massively long, but very, very pleasant. That kind of poached apple, we're not quite on tart tatin, but there is that a bit more of a toffee note coming through, as well as that sort of short crust pastry. And it's just lengthening that finish slightly. It does die off a little bit quickly, but you know, there's nothing wrong with that. And it lasts long enough that it doesn't kind of like you swallow and then it's gone. They have tried to make a whiskey that they wanted to make as approachable as they possibly could, because they wanted people to open this. So if you went down a peated route, not even heavily peated route, that it was always going to put some people off. And they are wanting this to be a celebration of the distillery, to be enjoyed by as many people as possible. Now, some people will say, oh, well, that just means you're making it boring and flat, and you know, approachable is actually a bad word. No, not at all. There's bags going on with this. Yes, you could go down the route of adding a little bit more smoke in and maybe making it kind of like, you know, more complex, but then that smoky element will put some people off. It's not one note, you know, it's not like arguably, you know, Glenfiddich 12 or Glenmorangie 10 or anything like that. It's got bags more to it. Because of the older whiskey that's in it, the older spirit, up to 18-year-olds, you've got a lovely mouthfeel as well. There's a real kind of like rich sweetness, rich silkiness coming through. It does coat the mouth, and that does help draw out that finish as well. I don't know anybody that's not going to like this. I think people that aren't going to like this are going to be whiskey snobs that want big, bold flavours, loads of complexity. They just want to be challenged with every sip, and they're probably going to be like drink Octomore and Lagavulin and Ardbeg, and anything that isn't like 60 ppm minimum is dull and ditch water anyway. Whatever. It's not for you. This is for people that just like whiskies in general, that like enjoying stuff, but actually want to open a bottle and share it with friends, some of which might not be whiskey drinkers. But if you've got this on a shelf that looks really impressive, beautiful bit of packaging, nice decanter, but affordable, and you can crack it open and go, oh, this is the English Distillery. Because there's still people out there going, English whiskey? What do you mean English whiskey? How can English? Surely, all whiskey is from Scotland. That's the only proper whiskey. Again, whatever. But this will be a fantastic introduction to, do you want to try an English whiskey? I didn't even know they did one. Oh, well, give this a go. This is the special one from like the oldest English distillery in the industry, that sort of thing. This is absolutely something I would put on a world whiskey tasting this is an introduction to English whiskey, because everybody in the room, I was just going to say nearly everybody, pretty much everybody in the room is going to go, oh, that's really nice. That's got loads going on. And it does. It's got loads going on, but it's not overly challenging. It's not overly smoky, anything like that. It's doing a fantastic job of just saying, this is a really, really good distillery who have got a lot of history, more history than anyone else in this category, who are making fantastic whiskies that are aging really, really well. Much more apple going on that. There's so much apple on that mouthfeel, and that's having sat there for a couple of minutes while I blah, 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 blah. But just opening out a little bit in the glass, I could almost say, oh, if I was trying it blind, I'd go, was that Calvados, maybe? Because that apple note has really come out. The touch of pear as well, but the apple and pear, particularly apple, and not a Granny Smith's apple either, almost like a Gala, not quite Golden Delicious, like one of those kind of like pink lady Gala type apples. And then that really nice soft baking spice as well. But like just letting this open out makes me feel like it's almost close to a Calvados. Again, that richness, that silky texture really, really works. It's great. It's so approachable in all the best ways. Loads going on, bags of flavour. A really good price point, beautiful bottle, really impressive, will impress friends, and then they'll probably turn around and go, that was only 75 quid. Well, I might have to get one. I might have to get one myself. It's one of those where I'd almost say, look, buy 2 bottles, get one, stick one on the shelf, keep it full, make it look good. Yes, investment. Oh, I don't care. I don't care about investment anymore. I've given up on investment because look at where the market is now. It's an absolute lottery. But I would say get 2 bottles to keep one, and then when this does disappear, because it will go eventually, you've got a fantastic whiskey that you can come back to. It's great stuff. I absolutely love it. I loved going down and doing the day in trade. It really kind of reminded me just how good a distillery it is. And I think it's kind of been a little bit unfairly maligned because of the quality of the liquid really early on, the first releases, and as the English category has grown, it's almost like people have forgotten that was there, because there's all these new ones coming out and it's all exciting and everything like that. And these guys are just pumping out really, really good spirit day in, day out, and doing some really interesting things as well. So available to purchase from the website www.spiritspecialist.com, $74.99 a bottle. I think that is an absolute bargain. I genuinely do. Consider they could have easily gone 100 quid, if not more, as a limited edition chapter 18 celebration, anniversary bottling, blah blah blah, all of that lot, and they didn't. And I really respect them for that, because I think compared to what a lot of other distilleries are doing at the moment in terms of limited edition bottlings and no age statements and all of this nonsense, and then putting another 0 on the end of it is just taking the piss. And these aren't. They've gone, we want people to open and drink it, and therefore we need to put it at a price where people will do that. And I think that's absolutely brilliant. And I wish more distilleries were doing it. And the liquid is fantastic. So what more do you want? So that is me done. I will see you at the next video. Cheers.